Hello Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And I got today's topic while researching last week's topic. So last week, I did a video about the Númenórean king Ar-Pharazôn. A commenter, Non-Care, requested that video, and so I did it. I had a great time researching it. While researching, I looked up Ar-Pharazôn's predecessor, Tar-Palantir. So Tar-Palantir had the gift of foretelling. His most famous prophecy was that should Nimloth, the white tree symbol of Númenor, die, that would signify the end of the line of Númenórean kings. And indeed, that prophecy comes to pass. Pharazôn burns the white tree, and subsequently, years later, Númenor falls into the sea, and Pharazôn is buried under a mountain. So bad things happen. Gold star to Tar-Palantir's foretelling abilities. But that got me thinking on who are some other figures in Tolkien's mythology that had the gift of foretelling. Certainly the spirits, the Valar and such, make prophecies that come true. Glorfindel, the elf, has the prophecy about the Witch King of Angmar, where he prophesies that no man shall kill the Witch King. In fact, it's a woman. It's Éowyn that kills the Witch King. So that prophecy comes to pass. But there is a human, I think we can say is a Númenórean, who gives not one but two prophecies in which he is right on the nose. And that individual is Malbeth the Seer. Malbeth the Seer does show up very briefly in Lord of the Rings. He is mentioned in Return of the King by Elrond. And he actually lived before the time of the War of the Ring, but his prophecies were essentially, both of his prophecies ultimately dealt with Aragorn. And so obviously relevant to the Lord of the Rings. These prophecies deal with the line of succession. And so just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, might be some things you already know here, but I think just to kind of keep everything in line, I should discuss really quickly background on the history of Gondor and Arnor. Because as I say, it's wrapped up in these prophecies. So, you've got the War of the Last Alliance. Elendil is killed tragically by Sauron during that battle. Isildur takes over. Isildur is king of Gondor and Arnor. Gondor in the south, Arnor in the north. A couple of years after the war, he decides, hey, I'm going to go back to the north. I'm going to actually visit my wife and my youngest son in Rivendell. And so he leaves control of Gondor to his nephew. Now, his brother, Anarion, was also killed during the campaign in the War of the Last Alliance. So he was no longer around. But his son, Anarion's son, Meneldil, was left to rule Gondor while Isildur's away. Meneldil sounds like a topical ointment, but in this case, it's a king. So, Tolkien even writes that Meneldil was not sad to see Isildur and his sons leave Gondor, and was kind of hoping they'd be gone for a while. So we get the idea that maybe they didn't get along that well, or at the very least, Meneldil had some designs on the throne. Okay, so Isildur rides off north. Isildur is still the king of both Gondor and Arnor. He's just got, hey, Meneldil can look after things while I'm gone. Well, what is known as the disaster of Gladden Fields happens. I did a video about it, but essentially a huge party of orcs kill Isildur and his sons, all of his sons except one. It's a horrible tragedy. That's where the ring gets lost, eventually to be found by Sméagol. Well, all right. So the only heir of Isildur that's left alive at this point is the little kid, the youngest kid of Valandil, who was hanging out in Rivendell. That's one of the reasons why Isildur was coming to Rivendell. So Valandil becomes king. He has to wait a while because he's so young. So a few years later, he becomes king. But here's the deal. Meneldil is like, yeah, you can be king of Arnor, but I'm king of Gondor now. And the son, the line of Anarion will be the rulers of Gondor. Isildur's heirs, you guys can rule Arnor. We, the heirs of Anarion, will rule Gondor. And that's the way it goes. Now, both Meneldil and Valandil both have very long reigns. They rule over 100 years each. That's just kind of the way things go for a while. Isildur's heirs up north, Anarion's heirs in the south with Gondor. All right, now take it to 861 of the Third Age. And remember, the War of the Ring is in the year 3019. So it's still significantly over 2,000 years before the War of the Ring. Earendur is the ruler of Arnor. He dies. He's got 3 sons. And the 3 sons essentially split up Arnor into 3 parts. Each son keeps his own realm. It's a fascinating tale, but it's a tale for another story. We'll leave that. I'm just saying that because it's going to be important for these prophecies of Malbeth. But just so you know, the oldest son, the kind of the rightful heir, if you will, from Earendur was Amlaith, and Amlaith rules what's called Arthedain. So his third of Arnor is Arthedain, capital of Fornost. And so that's kind of what happens. So the sons, these 3 brothers, they don't get along at all. They rule each of their own little part of the kingdom, and Arthedain is one of those parts of the kingdom. Okay, flash forward now about 1,000 years. It's 1864 of the Third Age, I believe, and the current king, Arafant, has a son. And at the time of that son's birth, his royal seer, Malbeth, makes a prophecy. And this is that prophecy. It says, Arvedui you shall call him, for he will be the last in Arthedain. Though a choice will come to the Dunedain, and if they take the one that seems less hopeful, then your son will change his name and become king of a great realm. If not, then much sorrow and many lives of men shall pass until the Dunedain arise and are united again. Okay, let's break that down real quick. So this is Malbeth the Seer, the birth of Arafant, the king's son. And he says, you should name this child Arvedui. Arvedui means the last king. So it's kind of a doom and gloom name. But he's basically saying the line of Arthedain, of this realm, is about to end with this king. So just so you know, you can call him the last king because bad times are ahead. And spoiler alert, he is right. So he names this child Arvedui. But then there's this part in here, if you notice, that it says, a choice will come to the Dunedain. If they take the one that seems less hopeful, your son will change his name and become a king. There is some dispute as to what event this refers to. I have my thoughts on it, but I'll give you both of the interpretations. So just so you know, no matter which interpretation you choose, the wrong choice was made, and so part B of that prophecy is what comes to pass. If not, then much sorrow and many lives of men shall pass until the Dunedain arise and are united again. What that's referring to is when Aragorn comes and unites Gondor and Arnor again, finally. But this is, that happens over 1,000 years after this prophecy. Okay, so what future event was Malbeth prophesizing? Here's the one that I actually am not a fan of, but a lot of people point to this moment in time as this is what the prophecy is about. Okay, Arvedui is now king. It is, I believe, 1974 of the Third Age. The 70s. Disco. No, okay. And it's bad times. The Witch King, we just mentioned the Witch King. Well, the Witch King of Angmar comes into Arthedain and takes over the capital, Fornost. The capital falls. Arvedui is forced to flee. He takes some of the kind of the royal artifacts with him, so he takes the Ring of Barahir. That's the ring that eventually, over 1,000 years later, Aragorn uses to betroth himself to Arwen. So at this point in history, in 1974, that ring is whisking its way across the country just ahead of the Witch King's forces. Two other things that Arvedui whisks away are two Palantiri. So he has two seeing stones that he's trying to keep away from the Witch King. All right, so he and his men flee, and they end up basically hiding out in these dwarven mines in the Blue Mountains for a time. They're just trying to evade the Witch King. Well, food gets scarce. It's looking bad for them, and they are forced to leave the mines. What they do is they go up to Arctic regions. They go to the ice bay of Forachel. And in Forachel, there is a group of Arctic folk known as the Lossoth. They're not Númenorian, but they are very hardy and very used to the Arctic conditions. And they agree to help Arvedui's men get through the winter. So they build them snow huts. They share what food they can, try to help them get by. The horses die. It's too cold for them, so they have no horses anymore. You know, it's kind of a Valley Forge, to make an analogy kind of scenario here, but they're getting by with the help of this group, the Lossoth. Okay. Meanwhile, Arvedui's son, who's not up in this region, goes to the elf Círdan, the Grey Havens, with all of his boats, and tells Círdan, hey, my dad is trapped up in this ice bay. Can we find a way to get him out of there? Círdan sends a large boat to aid Arvedui. All right. That boat comes up into the bay. At this point, the Lossoth have never seen a boat of that size come near their area before, because it's just, frankly, it's not a good idea. There's icebergs, there's all kinds of hazards for a boat. But this boat has shown up. Arvedui is going to get on the boat and head south back to Círdan's, back to the Grey Havens. But the chief of the Lossoth gives him a warning. Now, you could call it a prophecy, but it's not really a prophecy. It's common sense, essentially. But this is what the chief of the Lossoth tells Arvedui. Very interesting. He says, do not mount on the sea monster. If they have them, let the seamen bring us food and other things that we need, and you may stay here till the Witch King goes home. For in summer his power wanes, but now his breath is deadly, and his cold arm is long. All right, so he's basically saying, hey, have this boat bring us supplies. That's fine, but don't get on that boat, because frankly, the Witch King still has abilities, powers here in the winter. You should wait out the winter, let the summer come, when it'll be much safer for you to travel by boat. Well, Arvedui's having none of it. He's like, yeah, okay, crazy old man, I'm getting on this boat because I'm freezing and my men are cold and we're getting out of here. So Arvedui disregards the advice of the Lossoth, gets on the boat, and sure enough, huge Arctic blast of wind smashes the boat against an iceberg, essentially, and everyone dies. Arvedui goes down to the bottom. Those two seeing stones, never seen again. Luckily, he had given the ring of Barahir to the chief of the Lossoth as thanks. And it's later that the Dunedain essentially ransom that ring back, give him enough, in exchange to get the ring back. And then the ring eventually ends up with Aragorn. But if he hadn't given that ring as a gift, that would be at the bottom of the bay as well. But Arvedui dies. So, theoretically, that prophecy, this is when people that are advocates of this interpretation say that if Arvedui had chosen kind of the less hopeful option, which is wait here, wait it out, and then delay your gratification. If he had chosen that, he wouldn't have been killed in this boat. He'd still be alive, and the history would be different. And sure, I suppose that's a possible interpretation of this prophecy. But I would argue that, Fornos had already fallen. Sure, if he's around, perhaps he can help to take back the city. That area gets retaken. The Witch King is forced to flee a year later. But Arthedain never really becomes a kingdom again. Perhaps Arthedain becomes more of a kingdom again, since Arvedui would still be alive. But I don't know. It doesn't play as much into this prophecy of Malbeth as this second event, which I'm about to mention to you. I will say this, though, also. When Malbeth, one of the reasons we know that, or we suspect that Malbeth is a Númenorian, is that Malbeth is the seer for Arvedui's dad, Arfant, makes this prediction in 1864 when Arvedui is born. But he also, his second prophecy, which I'll talk about later, was made like 1964, somewhere in the 1964 to 1974 area. So there's 100 years between prophecies. Hence, if he was already an adult when he was making prophecies, and then 100 years later he made another prophecy, it sounds like he would be a Númenorian. Númenorians have much longer lifespans, and so that it kind of plays into that notion. But I'm wondering if maybe this moment when the boat hit was sunk, maybe this was the death of Malbeth as well. He could have been on that ship. He could have been one of the men with Arvedui trying to, wait out this winter. And so, anyway, just an interesting, perhaps, we don't know how Malbeth passed, but I think there's a reasonable chance that he was with Arvedui when he died in that bay. Maybe another reason why this prophecy isn't related to that, because then he would have predicted his own death and be like, hey, let's not get in this. I know what I'm talking about here. Let's wait this out. Any case, okay. So this is the event that I think this particular prophecy is talking about. And this happens a few years before Arvedui's untimely death. Okay. Arvedui, I believe it's 1940 of the Third Age, so again, still over 1,000 years before the War of the Ring, he marries the daughter of the King of Gondor. So at this time, the King of Gondor is Ondoher. And Ondoher's daughter is Firiel. They marry. Arvedui marries Firiel. A few years later, Ondoher and his sons are killed in battle with the Wainriders. It's kind of similar to the Isildur and his sons dying in the disaster of Gladden Fields. You've got like a whole family line getting wiped out in one go. The only living heir of Ondoher is Firiel, his daughter. So Arvedui makes the case. He comes to the Council of Gondor. They're ruled over by a steward. Pelendur is his name. If you remember in the Lord of the Rings, the steward of Gondor at that time is Denethor, right? So this is kind of a similar situation. There's a steward, and here comes Arvedui petitioning to be the new king of Gondor. And his strategy is it's kind of got a two-pronged strategy. One is, hey, I'm Arvedui. I am a direct descendant of Isildur. And Isildur was king of Gondor. So I should, in the absence of any other direct descendants of Anarion, I should be able to step in as a direct descendant of Isildur to be king. Secondly, my wife is Firiel. She should be considered a queen, by old Númenorian law, in Númenor, she would be considered the queen. And so either way you look at it, I should be on the throne of Gondor. The council meets, they think about it, and they basically come back and say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. We're going to go with Earnil, and that's what they do. Earnil, who becomes Earnil II, is a general. He's the general that won that battle, won the war with the Wainriders that resulted in the death of Ondoher. So he's this great general, huge military figure that led Gondor to, save itself, and he's the safe pick, right? Arvedui is seen as like, hey, your kingdom really isn't that big. We're taking a chance on you if we pull you in as king. We've got this guy waiting in the wings, wants the job, and has the vote of the military, so we're going to go with Earnil. Go back to Arthedain, Arvedui. And he's the last guy to try that. He's the last heir of Isildur to try to become king of Gondor until Aragorn over 1,000 years later. So you can see how that plays into the prophecy, right? The prophecy says a choice will come to the Dunedain. If they take the one that seems less hopeful, your son will change his name and become king of a great realm. All right. Well, the less hopeful choice would be take Arvedui. We're taking a chance on this guy. He is technically, has this bloodline, but we're going to go with a safe pick. We're going to take the general. So we're going to take Earnil. I should note too, one of the reasons that they said will pass was to say, oh, the Númenorian law where Firiel would be queen, well, that's Númenor, and this is Gondor, and we don't do that, so go away. Okay, so that was the first prophecy of Malbeth the Seer. I know that was a long way to go for that, but just because there was some, he's kind of the Nostradamus of Middle-earth, let's say. And that prophecy has a few different ways to look at it. His second prophecy was so specific that there's really no way you can misinterpret it. And again, it's right on the nose. You wonder how he made these predictions because they are so on the nose. You almost feel like perhaps, say, Eru or Iluvatar, the god, was speaking through him. I don't know what talent this individual had because he's speaking about events that are going to happen 1,000 years after he has passed. So his second prophecy, and actually I say him. Actually, we don't know the gender of Malbeth the Seer. I'm guessing that since most of the notable figures in Tolkien's mythology are male, Malbeth was probably a male, but could have been a woman. But Malbeth makes this prophecy, and he makes this prophecy during the short reign of Arvedui in Arthedain. So Arvedui rules from 1964 to 1974. That's when Fornos falls. He flees. It's in 1975 that he ends up in the bottom of the bay. Okay, so during this 10-year, 1964 to 1974, Malbeth makes this prophecy. He says, over the land there lies a long shadow, westward reaching wings of darkness. The tower trembles. To the tombs of kings doom approaches. The dead awaken. For the hour is come for the oath breakers. At the stone of Erech they shall stand again, and hear there a horn in the hills ringing. Who shall the horn be? Who shall call them from the grey twilight, the forgotten people? The heir of him to whom the oath they swore. From the north shall he come, need shall drive him. He shall pass the door to the paths of the dead. Okay, so this particular prophecy is about the paths of the dead. If you watch the movies, you're familiar with this as well. So Aragorn basically goes to the oath breakers, the dead men of Dunharrow, and asks them to renew their oath. So the oath breakers were a group of folks who back in Isildur's time did not answer the call. Isildur made them make an oath on this thing called the Stone of Erech, which is a huge round stone that was actually taken from Numenor before it fell. And it was placed kind of near where the Paths of the Dead are. And Isildur made the various tribes pledge themselves to him as king on this stone. So it's a very sacred stone. And so they pledged, okay, when you need us, we'll be there for you. Isildur called them within the War of the Last Alliance, and they didn't come. And so they were cursed to have their spirits be trapped here in this area, the Dimholt and everything. So then it's Aragorn that comes and says, hey, I have a chance for you to honor your pledge to my ancestor Isildur. I am his direct descendant, heir, and so I can absolve you of your sins. So if you look at that prophecy, that's exactly what it's talking about, right? It says, the dead awaken, the hour has come for the oath breakers at the stone of Erech. So in the book, in Return of the King, Aragorn has a silver horn. He blows the horn at the stone of Erech. He talks to the oath breakers, and they join him to go take on the corsairs of Umbar. So yeah, at the stone of Erech they shall stand again. They'll hear the horn in the hills ringing. Who shall call them? The heir of him to whom the oath they swore. So the heir of Isildur, which would be Aragorn. From the north shall he come. Need shall drive him, and he shall pass the door to the Paths of the Dead. Okay. So, right on the nose. I mean, this guy knows what he's talking about. And in Return of the King, it's Elrond that sends a message to Aragorn reminding him of this prophecy. So it's obviously well enough known that Elrond is like, I know this prophecy, and Aragorn would also know this prophecy. And so he gives him a message. The message says, bid Aragorn remember the words of the Seer. The Seer is Malbeth the Seer. And the Paths of the Dead. So there you go. He doesn't say Malbeth, but he does say the Seer, and that's who he's talking about. Elrond is talking about Malbeth the Seer and this prophecy that was made over 1,000 years ago that directly relates to Aragorn at the Paths of the Dead. Saves the day, essentially. I mean, the Paths of the Dead are a huge component to winning the War of the Ring. So that's the story of Malbeth the Seer. Fascinating character who had a unique set of skills, really. A very powerful individual. You wonder what other prophecies perhaps Malbeth made that didn't get written down and remembered through the ages. But again, it just shows you Tolkien's ability to, he just has a mention of this guy. It's bid Aragorn remember the words of the Seer. And what does that mean? Oh, well, there's a Malbeth the Seer, and he made these prophecies, and he lived at this time, and the reason he's the one that named the king, Arvedui. I mean, like, all that stuff is all in there, and he doesn't have to bring it up. He doesn't have to bring up every single point in his story. He just knows that background, and that's really what leads to this rich storytelling that Tolkien is able to accomplish. So there you go, everybody. Malbeth the Seer. If you've got a topic for something you'd like to hear, feel free to put it in the comments. Be happy to do a video about a topic of your choosing. Thanks so much, everybody, and I'll see you next time. Bye.